Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to stay curious today with Gary Allguire.
Pleasure to be here again today.
Great to see you, Gary. Gary's a structural engineer. He worked the shuttle era, and today we're going to talk about a little side thing you had
That's
working
right.
for the Department of Defense and those top secret shuttle missions, total of 11 of them. 8 or 9 of them may have changed our world. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but today we're going to talk about these DOD missions with Gary, what was involved, why they were top secret, what he can tell us about it, and very interesting talking to you. There's things written that you can't say is right or wrong.
That's correct. I can't confirm it or deny it.
All right.
So anything you say about the payloads, I can just say I can't confirm or deny what you said is anything.
Well, that's we're gonna learn a lot from Gary here, and you're gonna be fascinated with a group of astronauts I'll bet you never heard of that were top secret space flyers to be, and they were not the manned orbiting laboratory guys of the '60s. All right, so stay tuned for that. Here is a beautiful green screen behind us, Gary, of a orbiter Columbia over the Earth. It has a top secret payload in it. Often they would show a few pictures like this to tease you on there. But our $2 billion orbiters, the fleet of them, were basically designed for our national security.
That's right. That's right. The Air Force and the DOD actually drove the price of, or the size and the shape of the shuttle. They drove the payload bay to be 60 feet long by 15 feet wide. They also influenced the wings because they wanted to have cross-range capability coming out of orbit, whereas the NASA version did not have those wings on it. And also, one of the things they really wanted was to fly unmanned.
Oh.
And that was so that because their idea was to just launch it, go around, deploy the payload, and come back and land before it made a full complete orbit. And to do that, they didn't want anybody in there. And the astronauts said no way. So what they did is they put a manual switch for lowering the landing gear into the system, so that they could not land without an astronaut on board.
Oh, did not know that
Yeah.
that manual switch was in there for that.
Yes,
Very
that was the only
interesting.
reason.
Huh. Well, Gary has been part of the space program for a long time. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you got involved in it.
Well, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I went to a small college across the river in Illinois called Parks College, which was associated with the St. Louis University. It was an all-men's school. It was aeronautical Parks College.
Okay.
It's no longer there, but it was an aeronautical school. They had 4 curriculums. They had aeronautical engineering, aircraft maintenance engineering, aviation administration, and then they also had weather people that they could get a degree in that. And I started out as an aeronautical engineering, but I ended up going to the aircraft maintenance side of engineering. So it was a combination of an aeronautical engineer plus getting your A&P license, or your airframe and power plants license. And my senior year, I had a few interviews and a few going out to visit some places to see if I wanted to work there. And I really wasn't happy. And then I found out that NASA was coming to the campus to interview. I really wasn't sure that I should go, but a friend of mine convinced me to go. And lo and behold, I got an offer from him after the interview to go down and work at NASA in 1968.
1968, right, the height of the moon landings.
Yes.
How exciting that must have been for a young
exciting.
man.
Oh yes, yes, very exciting. It was quite an adventure, just driving down by myself and checking in a hotel and then finding an apartment and then starting to work.
Yeah, well, you have other siblings. Where'd you fall in your family hierarchy there?
I just have one brother.
Okay.
And that's it. He's still in St. Louis.
All right. Well, yeah, leaving from St. Louis to go to the West Coast and be involved in the Shuttle era during the end of the Apollo. And of course, St. Louis was the hotbed where the Mercury and Gemini capsules were built by McDonnell.
Well, my dad worked there, and he worked on some of that.
Did he?
Yes, and we were all very proud that they built the Mercury and the Gemini in St. Louis.
I'd like to go to St. Louis and see some of that. I don't know where that would be, a museum or the old factory of McDonald's, so to
Yeah,
speak.
some of that's probably not still there. I mean, it's they were on the north side of the St. Louis of the airport there, where they built the fighters, the F4s and the F101s up in St.
Very
Louis.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Gary's very interesting. As I digress there a little bit with a little bit about his family growing up there. His dad working with Gemini. That is so cool. We respect what the McDonald Company did in those early eras of unknown how to build a spaceship. We wanted to remind you all that we're going to have Shuttle Fest 2, April 15th, Saturday, at the Hyatt Place in Titusville, where we had it last year. We are centering Shuttle Fest 2 around the Mobile Launch Platform 2 and the art of space artist Chris Calley. So you're going to want to participate in that. And we're getting everything together to roll out our press release here within the next 2 weeks of who the presenters are going to be. And we're going to have the documentary Base to Space, which Mike Cotton, documentary maker, has done to honor the mobile launch platform number 2 that launched Apollo 11 to the moon. It also launched the fateful STS Challenger 51L.
Yes.
And you're no stranger to these mobile launch platforms, obviously,
That's
being a
correct.
structural engineer that you are.
Yeah.
Quite a thing to build, right?
Oh, it's quite a bit. Yes, all of that stuff, even especially with the pad and the payload changeout room, and all that stuff that we end up building for the shuttle was quite
Yeah.
interesting.
And I was fascinated by seeing, like at Northrop Grumman or Grumman, the structures they had to build to build the lunar module. I mean, that's a whole engineering feat in
Yes.
itself. Some of these
Yes.
stands and so forth that were constructed.
The OPF for the shuttle was quite involved, and then also for, like I said, for the pad, this for the shuttle itself, and then the payload changeout room was a real challenge for us stalling payloads out at the pad.
Mm-hmm. So we'd love to talk a lot about that at future Shuttle Fest. That's what they're going to be about, is highlight something every year. This year we're going to go with Mobile Launch Platform 2. And, we'll be coming up on a lot of 30th anniversaries. And in 2026, we hope to have the Space Shuttle in the Mir space station with its visits in 96 and 97 and 95. So, well, we're going to today talk to Gary about the U.S. Department of Defense. There's our Pentagon there. And one of the logos they have, there's our great Defense Department that keeps America safe. All kinds of this budget, of course, for the national defense is like, I don't know, like a fourth of our whole national budget for our great men and women in the military. Oh, the NRO one didn't pop up there. Okay, well, I guess we won't talk about that. Gary, you've been honored, like so many space workers, with a piece of certificate that says that you were involved on these 8 Department of Defense missions there.
Yeah, these were the primary secret DOD payloads, except for maybe the first one on STS-4, but the rest of the 7 were highly classified payloads that we flew.
And because of your involvement, you got this cool space flown flag. And I love these. They're such a great artifact for you all to own. We're going to have our auctions coming up here on the 17th, I think, Saturday, a week from Saturday. You might be able to buy, not Gary's, but there'll be some flags, space foam flags, even occasionally moon orbited flags, and once in a while you'll run into one that is on the surface of the moon. But these are fun to have and nice mementos of your job, right, on there. 18th, thank you, Marty. 18th is our auction with Chuck Jeffrey conducting our all-important auctions. We're going to start promoting those post-haste as we've got everything up and the auction's up online. Go to our website to find out about it there. Here, there's a lot of patches that come up that are kind of obscure from time to time. STS Contingency Support Office of the DOD. All right, Gary, you admitted you didn't know much about what this patch was
No.
even about, such as the secrets of the DOD, right? Whatever contingency support means. That could be the landing sites over in the transoceanic abort landing
Landing
sites,
sites,
or
yeah,
contingency always means backup, right?
right.
Backup plans, or try to figure out how to save the mission. But Gary, you're going to tell us now about these astronauts. No, they're not astronauts.
No, they're
They're
not.
called manned spacecraft engineers. This is the group of space flyers that I'll bet you know very little about. Stay curious, folks, and Gary's going to tell us.
Yes, they were formed back in. Let me look at my notes, make sure I got this right. Uh, when we had to see what we did that was back in 1979. They had their first group was of 13 Air Force and Navy personnel. One was Navy, and all the other 12 were Air Force, and they were selected to become manned spacecraft engineers, and they would be flown on the DOD missions as payload specialists. And out of that group, out of the 13 right there, only one actually flew on a shuttle mission. And there ended up being a total of 3 groups that were formed. The second group had 14 astronauts in it, and the third group had 5, and for a total of 32 of these astronauts. And 2 of them were females out of that total of the groups, and only one astronaut in the second group flew on one of the DOD missions. And at first, they were not well received by the astronaut office because they didn't go through the actual astronaut training program. They went through a modified one that they went through, and these guys were highly classified. In fact, I didn't even know who they were when we flew Gary Payton on STS-28.
And he's right in dead middle, front row there,
Front
Gary
row.
Payton. You called STS-28, actually it's 51C.
51C, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, yeah.
Which was the 15th shuttle in the program. We're gonna look at the logos, mission emblems, and talk a little bit about that. But this is the mission manned spaceflight engineer. All right, is what they were going to be called. Go to space, and would they be the engineers with the top secret satellite, or?
That was never really clear to us.
Mhm.
And in fact, we just knew that, especially for the 51C, that there was some issue with flying Gary Payton, and we never quite understood that. We just knew that somebody was not happy. I really think it was JSC that was not happy having him on board,
Right.
because the first thing, most people, in fact, there's people that I worked with, engineers, that would not work on a DOD program. They just felt that there's a separation between civilian and government, and they didn't want to get involved. But so I think that was a little bit of that at first, and it just took a little while with the astronauts working with these guys that they became very comfortable with them, and it worked out very well.
Mm-hmm. Would you were able to refuse a work if you like
Some people, they came through the office, and I was sitting there one day, and a project engineer came in and said, Gary, would you want to get a security clearance again to work on the DOD programs? Of course, I didn't know what was involved with that, and if I'd have known, I may not have done it. But it was quite involved to go get another security clearance. Normally, we have secret clearances, but this was something above the secret clearance that we had. So it allowed us to work. And it's very, very few people. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 of us that actually were cleared to work on the payload side of it, and the contractor was the same. We had just about 4 or 5 of those, and then we were allowed to go across the river to the Space Force now side of it, and we would go to their classified meetings.
Well, he's going to tell us a little what he can about this inner circle, but I'm going to tell you something. If you see this patch, this is a rare patch, and I'm talking $300, $400, $500 rare. These patches, I've never seen one except this photograph, and this is an entirely separate class of astronauts that they had to have at least 3 to 10 years service of active duty, hold the rank of first lieutenant to major, be able to pass the NASA physical exam, hold a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, Science, or Space, have a minimum 2 years in testing, launch support, flight, or missile operations. No flight background was required. You didn't have to be an aviator, okay, on there. And you could see why in 1979, some of these astronauts that were chosen out of the 35 new guys for the shuttle era and so forth, they kind of were like, they're going to take one of our seats.
Yeah.
Some of that going around, huh, Gary?
Oh, there's always some of that goes around. That's for sure. But anyway, that was just because they were at the time they were secret. NASA didn't announce this group until 1983.
You're saying the wives
People
would not know
that they were astronauts.
The clandestineness of it's hinted in the background with the shuttle kind of being dark back there. So, and these type of photos were taken, but were not. I mean, they probably came out Freedom Information Act or something.
They were
like
never
that.
published. In fact, I was surprised to see these on the internet.
Surprised to see a lot of stuff on the internet.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's amazing.
In there. We're talking to Gary Allguire. I love this guy. He's fascinating about what he knows about the shuttle era. He's a structural engineer. And Gary, you said, I said, what's that? And tell me how you describe a structural engineer.
We own everything. It doesn't have fluids running through it or electrons.
It doesn't have fluids or electrons running through it. He's good to.
We have it all.
He knows about it.
Yes.
So. Well, we're going to go through these great Department of Defense missions, and we're going to do several programs on Stay Curious About This, because we're going to juxtapose these with the coming down of the USSR being changed to Russia, direct result of some of these Department of Defense missions. So Columbia, the fourth flight of our big asset, our national asset resources of the space shuttle. Mattingly, who orbited the moon, and Hartsfield, a great astronaut who's passed away. There they are going out to the pad in their SR-71 style Blackbird jumpsuits there. And that is George Abbey, who is the chief of the astronaut selection. You had to please him to get in one of them seats there. So tell us a little bit about what is considered the first DOD mission, the fourth flight.
Okay, the first flight, STS-4, originally they were going to fly a highly classified payload on there, but there was a disagreement between Congress and the Air Force, and so that program was canceled. So in its place, they just kind of got a little pallet together and they threw a bunch of experiments on it. And Ken Mattingly was not happy with the...
Okay, what Marty says, we're just
Okay.
sorry there. Pardon to interrupt you there.
Okay.
Get a little closer.
Anyway, Ken Mattingly was not happy with that payload because there just really wasn't much to it. And that was also our first time we ever installed a payload vertically out at the pad. And the mission didn't go well. They had one of the experiments didn't work, and it had a lid that had to be opened to expose one of the experiments. And it didn't open up, and when they got back from Edwards Air Force Base after it landed, when it was in the OPF, they went ahead and tried to open it, and it popped right open. And what they found out was that when they designed it, they did not provide for equalization of the atmosphere inside the canister to go to from 1G environment to on orbit.
So it just sucked it down like a suction.
No, it pushed it up so hard that the latch could not overcome the friction from the thing popping open.
Huh.
So they never got the experiment that they wanted.
All right, and there's our crew there.
Yeah.
But what's considered the first DOD mission here, 51C in 1985.
Yeah, that one there was a very highly classified, and again, we started out maybe a couple of years before it actually flew, working with the Department of Defense, their contractors, some of the other organizations that were going to use this payload, and we could not. I guess the first thing we had to do is learn how to launch the shuttle. There was a lot of discussion about making the shuttle launch completely classified, and we realized, or they realized, that it was technically impossible to do that. There's a thing that happens when the crew wakes up in the morning for the day of the launch. They get a weather briefing, and that weather briefing is transmitted across the whole world to all the off sites and stuff like that. And that starts the clock. So if you know when that happens, then by then you really know when the launch is going to happen, minus any delays that they would have. So there was no way, and it also would complicate the shuttle for us to process it if it was classified. So we only classified certain areas, like when we was in the OPF, the platform 13s, which you just talked about the other day. From that level on up, everything was sealed off. We had security people, so only of those people that were cleared to go up there, the technicians to go in and reconfigure the shuttle bay for that particular mission. We'd put in the bridges, attach fittings, and so forth. And then the windows, the aft windows in the aft compartment had lockable covers over them, and only the astronauts.
Lockable covers, wow.
So
Well,
nobody,
2 windows are looking out in the payload.
Bay. And so they had lockable covers on them, so only the astronauts could, I think, had the keys. And there was a safe also placed in the shuttle for their classified procedures. So
a safe,
yeah,
that would have a combination on it for your procedure manuals.
Yeah.
Wow, I never thought about that.
So they had that in there, and it was all coded. So they just didn't go by open it, flip this switch or that. They just had a certain sequence number, and they'd have to open up the safe, pull out the document, and say what that was, and then they would go do it.
Very interesting. We've got a comment, and say hello to Marty Winkle there.
Hey, Mark. Hey, we've got a question from Gary Gerald. What was the normal crew on the DOD missions besides the commander and pilot? Did they have the same security clearance as the DOD flight engineers?
Yes. They would go through the same process that I went through as far as getting a security clearance. So all of those people, anybody that could have visual eyes on the payload, had the security clearance.
Visual eyes was the key, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Gary Gerald. He's in Collins, Georgia there, working hard, I'm sure.
You want to comment on the crew?
Yes.
Well, most of them, the first one, SDF-4, they only had 2 in there because of the ejection seats.
Right.
And so they only flew a crew of 2. But after starting with the 51C, they started flying 5. And I don't know if they went any above 5, if they went to 7 at all, any of those missions, but normally they were flying 5.
So to answer Gary Gerald, everybody on the entire crew and space workers that got to see this payload have to have the same level clearance.
Yeah, that was very, very few people.
And so you'd have 5 astronauts and maybe another 5 people.
Well, I mean, as far as that crew, we have the technicians that were in the OPF would not have the same security clearances that the ones that worked at the pad.
Gotcha.
Okay, because the ones at the pad inside the payload changeout room, we would take the payload out of the canister, which came over from the Air Force side, and then we would take it out, process it, and put it into the shuttle, and then continue processing. So all those people involved with that environment had classified security clearances.
One little thing about this patch of the, let's go back there to their patch there, is they've got the 4 astronauts there, and Onizuka, who lost his life at Challenger, was on this mission. Mattingly, again, the commander of his second, quote, DOD mission. Lauren Shriver, an astronaut I admire a lot, who became a commander. Buckley, and then look, they've got we're going to fly Gary Payton, this manned spacecraft engineer. So, like you pointed out to me, they just put his name on the tag on the bottom.
Yeah, that's kind of a sewed on.
Kind of a giveaway.
Yeah, it's sewed on. It's not really a part
Yeah,
of the
sewn on the
original
back,
patch.
yeah,
It's sewed
yeah.
on. If you pull this, turn it over, you'll see that it's not even at the same plane as the other,
Yeah,
as the
right.
main
And
patch.
they do that with several
Yeah.
add-ons in the program there. So
Yeah.
there's the crew there. Well, the next DOD mission. Oh, let's see. One other thing too. We just wanted to emphasize Hugh Harris, who's the public information officer, 35 years out of that office with NASA. He said these DOD missions, when he was the voice of NASA and announcing them, he wouldn't know when they were going to be launched until that morning or that evening.
Yeah,
They'd finally
okay.
say, like you said, he'd probably be tipped off by the
Well,
weather.
this particular mission was the only one where they had a blackout of the public affairs office. They didn't come online until 9 minutes before launch,
Wow.
and then they didn't say a whole lot. But then afterwards, they decided not to do that anymore. So all the launches from after that over at DOD were a normal launch as far as the PAO office.
Well, doing my research, Gary, multiple sources suggest the satellite deployed was called Magnum Orion Elent, a signals intelligence program about which little is known. And there was no, like you said, no pre-flight commentary. 9 minutes before launch was when they gave that it was going up, and that was January 24th, 85, almost a year to the day when we lost Challenger. So very interesting spy versus spy going on.
Originally, this was supposed to have flown on STS-10.
Okay.
And it didn't fly because the Air Force had some issues with their payload, so it was delayed till 51C.
Which ended up 5 shuttle flights later.
Yeah, it was actually, let me see, I think, no, I didn't have that down here.
The 15th, I think it was.
Yeah, there was the 50, that would have been the 15th launch of the shuttle.
All right. Well, then we're into the Department of Defense, and these satellites are the National Reconnaissance Office. That was a black ops situation that wasn't even acknowledged till the late 90s existed, right?
That's right.
NRO. So here's a typical one of these patches showing the patriotic theme, like we had with the Eagle of 51C. This one with our icon of freedom, the Statue of Liberty, symbolizing what this mission's all about, is protecting the freedom. And there you have another astronaut tagged on the bottom.
Yeah, he was another in the second group of selected MSCs, manned spacecraft engineers, and he was the only one that flew out of that group. Now, several of them were already as backups, or they were going to fly out at Vandenberg, but those missions never happened. So those were the only two that flew, and out of the 33 of those, 5 of them became generals in their lifetime.
Interesting. And we're going to talk about Vandenberg here next. This is the declassified payload, DSCE-3 Roman numerals. And of course, Gary, you never saw that.
No.
In there, but we're seeing it now. So it kind of gives you an idea. Maybe these payloads didn't always occupy the entire payload base 60 feet, but it sure crammed in that 15 feet wide there. So we're going to talk about what is always a fascinating topic on Stay Curious, the Slick 6, the site, and I'm going to just jump right here. There it is. Tell us about that, Gary, and then we'll talk about the crew.
Okay, this was Vandenberg. This is Slick 6.
Slick 6.
And it's in the south base of Vandenberg. There's a north base and a south base. And I just did a little thing, and it's about 11 miles distance between where the shuttle would have landed on the runway until it was towed over to this facility to be stacked and worked on. So it traversed across county roads, and so all the road markers and signs had hinges in them. So when the shuttle passed through, as it was being towed through that on those roads, they could hold those down so that the wings would clear as they went by. And I think also the roads were widened or so that the wings would pass through valleys.
Yeah, you see along the mountain area where they carved them off and so forth in there.
I think you had a question.
A question, Marty.
Yeah, I got a question from Carlton Bailey. were they tacked on the bottom because NASA wanted to separate from their astronauts?
Oh, the name tag on the bottom, the manned spaceflight engineer that we showed here, uh, on there, where they tagged on the bottom to show that they were different astronauts.
I think that's probably true. Like I said, they were not recognized at the beginning as true astronauts, and then as the program progressed and they worked with them, they became more accepted into the program. And but those patches were made. It seems like that was just an add-on tag.
And Carlton points out, thank you, Carlton, for pointing that out. This was one of the first exercises of a crew, was they would choose their artwork,
Yeah.
and a commander could see who was coming forward with ideas and kind of get a personality thing about their artisticness, and then several people, would want to do it, and others would just kind of go along with it. But this was designed by the crew of four, and then the manned spaceflight engineer came on board
And
again.
until they were publicly announced by name, they were highly classified, and so I don't know. I'm sure they knew who they were due to their classification, but to the average person, we didn't know.
You didn't know till they got in the spaceship
Yes.
there. And they're Watterson and Aldrin. Now, this is the crew of designated 62A, which was going to be the first launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base. The 6 was going to be the 86 fiscal year, and 2 meant Vandenberg. 1 in that second of this alphabet soup of numbers. 1 is Kennedy and 2 is Vandenberg, and A was going to be the first one. And here are the astronauts, all right. And what is very interesting is the 2 guys on the bottom, Watterson and Aldridge. Why don't you tell us about those guys?
Well, Matterson was in the first group of astronauts that were selected by
He's
the military.
far right, back
Yeah.
picture.
And then Pete Aldridge was the deputy director, undersecretary of the Air Force.
And director of the top secret, not disclosed yet, National Reconnaissance Office.
You can say
This was a big wig that was going to fly in the
Yes.
shuttle.
It's quite interesting that Crippen and would fly with such an inexperienced crew the first time launching out of Vandenberg. Now, Vandenberg, working with the Air Force with them was quite different than working with the Air Force here at the Cape Canaveral Air Base. We worked with the 6555th, which worked very, very well with us. But my experience going out to Vandenberg was they were not quite as accepting our advice and our opinions, and so it's questionable. I really question how successful that mission would have been launching out of Vandenberg.
Well, it'd been Cripps' 5th flight, and the only other experienced one on this, I think, is Jerry Ross may have had one flight there. Guy Gardner was the pilot on the left. Mike Mullane is there in the center, and on the right-hand side there is, I forget who we got on the right side there, but I can go backwards to the patch. 2 Gardners, Bill Gardner and Guy Gardner there, bookends there. So there is the clamshell behind there that was going to encase the shuttle and be its OPF and orbital processing facility and VAB all in one.
Yeah, they didn't have any provisions for installing payloads horizontally, I don't believe. They wouldn't have a requirement for it, but all those would have been vertical. And I did go down to...
Oh, right, yeah, there's no space SSPF.
And we went out to it, took a tour of it, and I did go down...
Did you really?
Yeah. And what was interesting was the firing room was in the pad perimeter.
Wow.
And
like within 2 miles of
yeah, and what going to their Air Force meetings and then going to the NASA meetings, the Air Force was planning on when after the payload is installed, they were going to kick all the NASA people out of the firing room. And I'd go to the NASA meetings, and of course they were going down the road. We're going to launch, we'll be in the firing room the whole time. And unfortunately, I couldn't tell at the time which was Charlie Mars was in charge of that. I couldn't tell him that that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But in reality, they would have had to back down on that. They just didn't have the experience to launch a shuttle, and I think that would have been. But there was a lot of issues with the with what they were doing out there, and they could never overcome the hydrogen buildup from the
Yes.
engines.
Look, and I mean, he mentioned Charlie Mars, of course, one of our founding fathers of the American Space Museum. I call him the Godfather. He was the manager involved in building all of this into a shuttle. And above my head are the two vents for where all of the SRB and hydrogen
Yeah.
exhaust would come out of there, and you were really worried about it blowing up under those tunnels.
Well, they were afraid that the hydrogen would build up so much because they just didn't have it in the open air like we do here at the Kennedy.
Mhm.
And when they lit off the engines, there'd be a big explosion and blow off the end of the shuttle.
That's why you see those sprinklers
Right there.
on underneath that before the
Yes.
engines ignite. That is burning off all the extra hydrogen.
Like I said, I went to Miami because that's where the Air Force had hired somebody to build their payload ground handling mechanism, and they just took the drawings that we had used to build the ones that we had at our pad. But what they did is they took out all the extendable little platforms that we had to allow to get access to the payload once it was installed in the orbiter. And I questioned it, and I said, "Why are you doing that? I mean, it's free. You already have them. We don't want them." I said, "Well, you need them." He said, "No, we're just going to put them in there, and that's it. We don't need to do anything with them," which is a pipe dream. All the payloads have something that they need to do once they're in the orbiter. So they would have never had any access to their payloads once it was installed. And but
Well, that was the
Never
Air Force
happened.
running their own space shuttle
Yeah.
program at one time. They were going to buy Discovery, OV-103, and make it their centerpiece. Of course, the advantages of launching here were what?
Well, they can go in the polar orbit there, and their idea was one of the plans was to just go launch, go around, drop the payload off, put it in orbit, and then land as they came back in, come back in and land right then. So it would never actually complete a full orbit. And this is what drove the Russians to build the Buran.
Okay.
They really got worried about this, so they wanted to make equivalent to that. So that's what started their program.
Their space shuttle, the Buran.
And when we come back and we talk about shuttle, I'll go more in detail about the Buran and how it got developed
Oh, love that.
and what they did and then why it never flew again.
Okay.
It was highly damaged when it came back in.
We'd love to talk about the
Yeah, so-
Buran. It's kind of
yeah.
a thing with the space hipster community. 30,000 on
Yeah.
Facebook. They reset the clock when anyone discovers, oh, the Russians had this Buran.
And they all think it was the better shuttle because he could land without a pilot in it.
Yeah.
And that was false.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear back from Gary. Here is Slick 6 with the shuttle on it, beautiful flowers, and they did use it and are using it for National Reconnaissance Office
Yes.
satellites there on the Deltas and the Atlas, and I don't know if ULA is going to plan to shoot the Vulcan
Well,
off from
you
there.
know, from the shuttle standpoint, it was a very poor place to put it because of the mountains in the background, and they were worried about the sound,
Oh, yes.
the
The
vibration
shuttle tile
tiles
coming
coming off, and
sound
it-
suppression
it was
system.
poorly executed, in my opinion. And it was probably the best thing that they did cancel that program out there after Challenger.
Well, and it was going to fly. This group right here was going to fly with the Undersecretary of the Air Force and the chief of our spy satellite system there, the upper left there, Aldridge, in July, summertime 1986. And of course, January 28th, 86 changed a lot of plans for
And
the entire shuttle.
One of the other side effects of Challenger was originally there was a big push to fly the Centaur upper stage in the shuttle.
Oh gosh, yes, I've heard a lot
And
about that.
there was a tremendous concern about how hazardous it was having an oxygen and hydrogen combination in there. And the school of thought then was, if we're ever going to have an accident, it will be when we fly that.
Uh-huh.
And so, as because of Challenger, they canceled that program, which was probably another.
Oh, there are a lot of astronauts I've talked to did not want to fly with a fully loaded Agena rocket, and then all the venting that would have to be done
That's
to keep
right,
it
yeah.
alive.
Yeah.
I mean, these are living sort of
Yes,
rockets. They have
yeah.
to be taken care of.
Yeah.
You just don't plug it and shoot it up.
I went to the design review out at San Diego, and they were having a problem with trying to figure out how to even get the thing out of the payload bay. So I wrote we call a RID, which is, you put a comment in there. I said, well, use the arm. Boy, did that get people upset. The people in charge, they just said, who did this? Who wrote this? And I had to get up and say, and they said, we have already argued about this. We are not going to fly it. Don't ever say that again.
It's good. Good story, Gary. Well, let's get on with some of these DOD missions here as we're enjoying a nice conversation with Gary Allguire. This is a very famous mission, STS-26, with some great astronauts. They did a top secret deployment and almost lost their lives on reentry. We'll talk about that in a second. But Gary, tell us about STS-26, 27.
27.
Atlantis,
okay.
December 88.
Well, the only thing I can really kind of say that's been out there is reportedly that the astronauts did an EVA to repair a stuck antenna. And there's never been an official confirmation of that. So we really don't know if it was them that repaired it, or it actually just by cycling a bunch of switches that it actually deployed.
Well, I actually, and of course you don't know this because you're top secret clearance and all, but Jerry Ross at a astronaut luncheon at Kennedy Space Center that I went to said that he's done 10 EVAs and his 11th was on this top secret mission. He openly talked about it. I think it was an antenna. He said that I did an EVA on this mission. They won't give me credit for it because it was a top secret mission. So you would think after decades that it would be okay to let people know that and him get an EVA checked off in the records of annuals. But so many things go on like that, Gary, and it's not important to NASA or the space program to keep these records individually.
Yeah.
I guess that kind of emphasizes that we were all a team together. But there's Hoot Gibson and Guy Gardner again on his second DOD mission as a pilot. Jerry's in the middle there. This is, am I on the right one there? Yeah. But what I want to talk about is when, you talked about the mission. I want y'all space geeks to know that this mission come back one of the most highly damaged shuttles ever. You see underneath the pilot's side there, the missing tiles. Hoot Gibson felt the impact of foam coming off the ET hitting the side of the shuttle, and he was very unhappy about it. And here is some pictures after it landed, showing missing tile right in the right place, Gary. If it had been to the left or right, it would have burned through. It was over a structural, I'm going for a better word, girder there. You know what I'm talking about, I guess. But it was a very close call with STS-27 there. And wanted y'all to remember that. Okay. Well, then we go to STS-28, Columbia, a back-to-back, again with astronauts here. Adamson is a good friend of our museum. We did a Stay Curious program with Jim Adamson then. What a dramatic, I love this. Look at this one real quick here, 28, what it says about the portrays the American people have in their namespace flight here. It depicts the American Eagle guiding the space program, the shuttle, safely home from an orbital mission. The view looks south on Baja California and the west coast of U.S. as space travelers re-enter the atmosphere. The hypersonic contrails created by the Eagle and Space Shuttle represent the American flag. The simple boldness of the design is symbolic of America's unfaltering commitment to leadership in exploration and development of space, and that we're going to keep our top secret missions alive. And probably not much you can tell me about this one, is there?
Well, this actually was my last involvement with the DOD program. After during the final phases of us getting ready to launch, I was selected to be a branch chief for a payload operations group that they had just formed up, and therefore I didn't need my clearance anymore. So I didn't get to participate all the way through on this particular one, but it was a very interesting mission again. And I was invited over to the Air Force side, and I was actually got to see the videos of it after it was deployed in orbit. That was my only, I guess, reward at the time. And but
Whatever was deployed in orbit,
yeah,
in other words.
yeah,
They hauled a satellite data system spacecraft into orbit, supposedly relaying imagery from other military satellites in 1989. In fact, this satellite could have been the ones that transmitted images of Osama bin Laden coming down. These are the type of satellites that they put up in space.
I'm not going to confirm that or deny it.
All right, Gary. No arm twisting there, buddy.
No.
All right. Well, then you did, like you said, you segued into other areas, but we wanted to highlight some of the other missions and their importance to America's security. These missions of 1989 through 92 were done during the Reagan administration and then the George H.W. Bush administration. This one, STS-33, kind of, they had a lot of fun despite the seriousness of the mission there. Astronauts always did a serious shot, and then they did kind of a campy one there. But we've got, this is significant by 2 passengers there.
Yes, those were the only time we had 2 civilians fly aboard a DOD mission. That was Kathy Thornton and Story Musgrave.
And Story's the bald
Yes.
gentleman there in the
Yeah.
white tuxedo, and of course Kathy there. DOD mission for Fred Gregory. Marty, you saw Mr. Fred Gregory today out to Space Center. How was he doing? We love him.
He's doing fine. He gave a good talk and seemed relatively energetic, so looking good.
Yeah, I enjoy his demeanor. He's very very interested in the space community that comes out there to see him, and this was his last day out there, I believe, right, Marty? And Terry Wilcutt's up next with our astronaut wrangler Nick Thomas, who's going to be doing a program February 20th all about John Glenn in Mercury Atlas 6 of our wonderful astronaut, Mr. John Glenn. There's the crew. Got to show them being serious there. 4 in the upper deck there, and Kathy would be flying in the mid deck by herself. Of course, the upper deck's the cabin up there. Look at all those dials and switches and everything. A couple thousand of them in that thing.
There's quite a few.
Quite a few. And then we had STS 36 was launched, and what's unique about this one? And Mike Mullane, another. They really used the guys apparently that had some credentials,
Yeah.
the DOD clearance. But,
Well, what's unique about this was after the solid boosters were jettisoned off of the shuttle, they did a dog leg and they went up to 62-degree inclination, which was the highest that the orbiter's ever flown.
wow. So that's a near polar orbit.
Yeah, they flew over the Arctic Circle, into the Arctic Circle on the upper end, and then when they went to the south, they actually could see Antarctica from their view.
And we'll never see pictures of that probably
You will
anywhere.
not. No.
I would love to see the Antarctica from the shuttle.
No.
But I'd also like to see pictures of Moscow from this satellite there. Duh. I wonder why they put that in a polar orbit, just so that Moscow could crawl under it once in a while there and take pictures. And I will say this, my conversation with Mr. Jim Adamson, who's, like I said, I see him quite regularly at a luncheon I enjoy going to and privilege to go to. When I've talked to him about the DOD missions as an Army guy, and he's been very well connected, astronaut Jim Adamson, his comment, Gary, is they all had some interesting assets to them.
Mm-hmm.
And these missions were flown during President Reagan's Star Wars announcement of an umbrella type of technology from nuclear attacks. So, and we're going to develop more about this in the Reagan connection with the premier of Russia of the United Soviet Socialist States, Gorbachev at the time.
Yeah.
There we love showing different pictures. This is STS 38 on the runway there. And actually, that was 36 on the runway there. They had the inclined orbit out there at the Edwards Air Force Base. And Gary, at least the payload bay's empty. That's all he can tell me. Well, our good friend Bob Springer, Marty, was on this mission, STS 38. And this was declassified before launch. You're telling me this is a reflight. No, 39 is a reflight. That's right.
Yeah.
38 is going out to the pad at the same time that 35 is going out to the pad, which had Astro 1 on it and was launched in November of 1990. Marty, that had to be exciting. I don't know if you remember being on a shift there and seeing two shuttles on mobile launch platforms being ferried to their respective. I think one was going back to the VAB and one to the pad. Astro 1, I think, was going back in.
Going back to 36 now, 36 payload was the last of the DOD payloads that we really flew, the classified ones.
Okay.
And the reason we flew those after Challenger is because they had already been designed and built to fly in the shuttle bay. If that had not happened, it was too costly for them to convert it to fly on a Titan.
Okay.
So that's why we still flew those.
Aha. And then they segued to the single stick rockets there.
Yeah.
STS 44 was another. No, wait a moment. 39. What is this one?
It should be 30. So it should be 39.
Yeah, this was 39. 39 arrowhead shape represents a skyward aim to learn more about our planet's atmosphere and support the Department of Defense mission there.
And that was a reflight of STS-4, and the payload did work that time.
9 years later, they flew the same payload on that.
Which was on a pallet. It was just a bunch of experiments, but the one that they really wanted did work.
And that's the crew of it, and here's a photograph of whatever's going on back there. This is a declassified picture of that payload. Something going on, Gary, and I don't
know what it is either. So.
Yeah, they had to have put some sort of
they never.
Well, I really think it's a laser light show for the Max Q band. is what they're doing there. But this says, and look at the back of the OM pods and the vertical stabilizer, kind of shiny.
Yeah.
With some backlight there. And then one final one, STS 44. This had a unique participant on it.
Yes.
There in the center, the back row. Tell us who that is.
That's Chief Warrant Officer Thomas Hennon, United States Army. And he was the first non-officer really to fly, and I guess an Army officer to fly on the shuttle.
And there's Story Musgrave, his third DOD flight, sort of. And Gregory's the commander there.
Now, he was a warrant officer. He wasn't an actual officer. He was a warrant officer. And from what I know, which is very little, but warrant officers would fly the helicopters that the Army had, like the Hueys at the time. They were warrant officers.
Okay. And in 1992, well, and Hennon's a great guy.
Yeah.
His one and done flight there. He's the only Army active to fly in space. And there they've got the satellite in the background. So like Gary said, they declassified some of these things at that time.
And that was a satellite that detects the launches of rocket motors. It's got a heat sensing device on it, and they've been in orbit, a series of those for quite some time, and that's they launched, I think only one out of those out of the shuttle, maybe two, but that was it.
That was the first way to see a rocket headed our way is to detect the exhaust
yes.
off of it in there. So And then the last official DOD mission of Shuttle was STS-53. Walker, the commander, Bob Cabana, the pilot. This was in 1992, and there's the group of them there at that's the nets of the escape system, the hang wire type of thing that they had from the shuttle to 195th point down into those there. And then this year of 1992, after this flight, the existence of the National Reconnaissance Office was revealed. And that ended NASA's involvement with the DOD 30 years ago.
That's correct.
1992.
Yeah.
What do you have to add to that, my friend?
Well, it was an interesting program to work on. I was privileged to be part of that. I got to see stuff that I would, normally nobody else gets to see. And I think one of the strongest impression I had from the Air Force side is their commitment to protect us. Their motto was, mission failure is not an option. And that was, I think, it was just drove it into them. And they would not fly with an unexplained anomaly, whereas NASA would. And if there was we couldn't prove what the problem was, we had to replace it. And we never flew with an unexplained anomaly with them. And they were very, very dedicated in protecting the United States and our lifestyle, and highly motivated Air Force people and other Department of Defense people that I interfaced with. And I was very proud to have been able to participate in that in my time.
Well, we thank you for your service to our country in that way, Gary. Quite obviously, it's a very serious protecting our country, our assets with these $2 billion shuttles. Actually, during the 1990s, brought down the Berlin Wall. There's a direct evidence of that we're going to talk about. How what was revealed to the Russians in some top secret meetings was that, like, hey, yeah, we've got some good assets up there in space. So we thank you for being here today. What a great program. We hope you all enjoyed that. I just wanted to point out some major, this is a Tom Usiak and Mark Usiak photograph of STS 53 going up in 1992. And though Tom took that on a Hasselblad camera, one of the most iconic images of a shuttle launch is this one going up to space 53 in 1992. Hope Dave Stangy's enjoying that. He's watching today's show with Doug Forrest, Steve Hammer, Larry Pusker. Bill Whiting gave us 99 stars. You're going to have to meet Bill one day. He's living around here.
Yeah, I did meet him the other day.
Yeah, you did meet him. That's
yes,
right. Cliff Watson from Pomona, Australia. He's still enjoying summertime down there in Australia. Sent us 400 stars today. Thank you, mate.
I think that's the record.
That's the record. Yeah, that's probably a $20 bill or more down there. Thank you very much. We do get a check from Facebook on all these stars that you add to us there. Hen Jacoba, Pablo De Leon, Cynthia Rossi's watching. Hello, young lady. Melissa Pope, Charlene Walker, Neil 1030, Tom Celentano, Francisca Scoriana, and Ophelia Sauterol. She is in France staying curious with us. And I'm sure Robert Law is watching in Dundee, Scotland. This was our green screen, a clandestine top secret mission over the Middle East there. That's the Nile River. And Gary, from time to time, they would reward you for doing your job well up there at NASA. Yeah. I'm always tickled by these. This is from the Air Force acknowledgement, huh?
Yes.
We got the real goods right there. All right, there, and something to hang on your wall with pride. Says this 655th ASTG spacecraft division pin flown into space aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia. In August 89 is presented to you, Gary Allguire, in recognition for your efforts on support of Department of Defense shuttle mission STS-28. and a colonel has signed
That's
that.
Colonel Robert Bourne.
Okay.
He was the commander of the 65th, 55th.
All right, and that is cool. This space flown coin
Yeah.
is quite a rare looking coin there. Um, Trying to see what's in the center of it there. Hard to tell, the artwork is so
Yeah, it
tiny,
is,
but that's
yeah.
really cool. And there's the space flown flag we were talking about of Gary's there. And I love those. And then you always get something signed once in a while. Wait, where do we have your?
It's an
Oh,
alligator.
yeah, there we are. There's it's a what?
It's an alligator holding, leaning against a satellite.
Oh, all right. So I'm going to make a close up. Oh, yeah, it is an alligator. I thought looked like an astronaut.
No, it's an alligator.
Alligator leaning against the satellite is that coin on there, and there you got an autograph from the manned spacecraft engineer himself, Gary Payton. And what he says there, Marty, can you read it for me? Yeah, I think it's cool to read that, Marty.
Yeah, thanks to Dave,
Read into the.
of the few hard workers left in the business.
One of the few.
One of the few hard workers
Yeah.
left in the business. And also, I don't know if you noticed that, but
That's not an alligator.
oh, sure, doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it does look like it. Yeah, I thought that
I
too.
think it's a log with
Like an
hood
alligator
open.
taking a yawn there. Well, that's something nice from Gary there, to one of the hardworking guys that he found in there, and saw how serious you were and involved in that. And I think you relayed to us quite well how serious this program was
It was
to
very
our
serious,
nation
yes.
and our security, particularly in the early 90s, when President Reagan, when he became president, Gary, he was told, debriefed that, and I've told this by several people, that he was debriefed that, of course, President Reagan, we have this Cold War going on. And he immediately said, let's win it.
That's good. He was a good man.
And I think we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
In
At that
our
time,
way.
we sure did. Yes.
In our way.
Yes.
Gary, thank you for sharing your knowledge of what he
Yeah.
could tell us, folks, about the DOD missions. You're truly a national treasure to us here at the American Space Museum, and we're so
Well,
glad
thank you.
what you do to support us here. And you like our nonprofit. We're looking kind of spiffy and
Yes.
a lot of energy every time you come here,
There's
right?
a lot of people visiting the center, and we have some pretty good docents that can explain a lot of things to them.
Absolutely. Well, and you're welcome to come anytime
Okay.
too and help us out docing. Wouldn't you love to hear what Gary has to share on your tour of the American Space Museum? Marty, thank you for a great Streamlabs job today. Do we have anything to clean up on our Stay Curious guest list there?
Nope, we're all good to go.
Well, thank you again, Marty. And Gary, we appreciate you coming. You're going to come back in March, and he's going to talk more about the structural things about building a shuttle that he knows about. What kind of material did they use? Why the what's this frizzy stuff that we hear talked about, and
Okay.
and all the blankets covering it there later on. You're going to tell us a little bit about being a structural engineer next time on Stay Curious. So tomorrow we were planning on having Mr. Hugh Harris, but he's a little under the weather and called me a little bit ago. So tomorrow we're going to talk about shuttles of the month of February, 11 great missions, and we'll highlight a couple of those, as well as highlight 2 or 3 more astronauts for Black History Month here in February. So until then, I'm Mark Marquette saying we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.